Sirius XM. This is the Opie and Anthony Show.
We have returned. Bring those guys in.
Hi, everybody.
Opie went to the toilet.
The turlet.
And we have Joe Berlinger, who is one of the directors of Paradise Lost 3, Purgatory. And we have Jason Baldwin, who is one of the West Memphis 3.
Jason right there.
You guys are victims, man. You're victims of a horrible, horrible miscarriage.
I feel like I know you. It's so weird because the documentary, over the 3 documentaries, you absolutely went from us seeing you as a child, pretty much, and now as a grown man, and we know pretty much everything that's gone on in that interim. So it's kind of weird to have you sitting here. It's like, oh, I know this guy.
Right.
Yeah. Do you find that odd when people kind of know?
We didn't get Sirius Radio back there where I was at.
No, huh? Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Do you find that odd? Do a lot of people kind of feel like they know a lot about you because, and honestly, they do?
Yeah, it's definitely odd, but it's very cool. You know, people just pop up out of the scene, you know, just wherever I'm at any given time. And it's like, hey, I just wanted to say, you know, I prayed for you, or I was pushing for you, or pulling for you, whatever the case may be during this time, and just glad to see you out. And to me, that's just awesome, you know.
And if we can let people know, most people know this case, this documentary, and all the ones you've done are enraging. It makes you so angry watching these things. Do you want to, in a nutshell, just let people know? I'm sure most people know, but anyone who might not know exactly what happened to you or what you were accused of.
Right. Well, shoot, it was I was 16. I was on my last day of school for the 10th grade when the police just come and snatched me out of my friend's house, snatched my friend up, snatched another guy up, and just railroaded us for his crime we didn't do. They refused to listen to reason. You know, I had family, friends, everybody that was, you know, willing to state where I was at the time of the crime, and
so you did have
alibis.
It
just fell on deaf ears. Yeah, I had alibis, you know.
And it was the murder of 3 local boys.
3 8-year-old boys.
Found in a wooded area. And, yeah, you guys got scooped up, and they pretty much said, that's it, we got our guys, and pretty much made it fit instead of trying to find out who really did it.
And the boys they thought were killed as part of a satanic ritual because there were scrape marks which appeared to be knife wounds on them. One of the boys was castrated. So it looked like this brutal satanic ritual crime. And I remember watching the first documentary and just being horrified to think of having been in the woods, because I thought you guys were guilty the first time, at least the first part of the first documentary. Didn't you think that when you first began making the first movie of Joe Berlinger too?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's the amazing thing about this, you know, 3-film, 2-decade journey is that when we first went down, all the press reports were incredibly one-sided. We didn't know it was one-sided at the time. We just read these press reports about a open and shut case, overwhelming evidence, confession. You know, we went down to Arkansas, you know, sent by HBO, thinking we were going to make a film about disaffected youth. You know, how could 3 teenagers be so rotten that they could do such a horrible thing? In the first couple of months, we had no reason to think otherwise because we were primarily spending time with the victims' families. But the first time I met Jason and the other guys, you know, they were all in county lockup awaiting trial. And, you know, it took us a couple of months to negotiate access. And once we did the interviews with these guys, we were like, wait a second, something's not right here. I mean, Jason was incredibly, he just drips with credibility. He does now, he did then. He just was incredibly believable. You know, all the guys, we just totally believed that. I mean, it's not like we said, oh, my God, they're innocent, because that would be journalistically a little quick to judgment. But something didn't feel right after we did those interviews. Then we got to know the attorneys, then we started digging into the evidence, and we realized the evidence was incredibly weak, incredibly circumstantial, no physical evidence linking these guys to the crime. And we were naive enough to think that, well, this will all work itself out at the trial, because we actually arrived, you know, days after the arrest. We embedded ourselves in that community for about 8 months before the trials began.
Oh, wow.
So we really were there. We really dug in. And by the time the trials began, we were convinced of their innocence, but I guess naive enough to think that, you know, the justice system will work and they'll present their case and they'll be acquitted. And we then sat through a 2-week trial for Jesse Miskelly, followed by a 3-week trial for Eccles and Baldwin. And our mouth, you know, was just jaw-dropping. I mean, our tongue was on the floor half the time of this trial because again, no real physical evidence, and rumor, innuendo, ghost stories were being told.
Can I ask you a question, Joe?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think Jason Miskelly, his name is?
Jesse
Oh, I'm
Miskelly.
sorry, Jesse. There was a false confession, which I think is really hard to get around for defense lawyers, even if it was coerced, which I'm sure it was coerced, or he wasn't the brightest guy. He was
72 IQ, yeah, so not the brightest guy.
And when you give a confession where you're going, well, we did do this and we did do that, it's hard for a jury to wrap their head around the fact that, like, this is not true.
Because anybody would say, look,
I would never
say I did something if I didn't do it. So it does hold a lot of weight with the jury, yeah.
Well, you know, false confessions are a very common phenomenon. People under pressure, under police interrogation, you know, will say things just to get out of that immediate situation. The less intelligence you have, the more you're not thinking long term. You're just thinking, I got to get out of these 5 cops breathing down my neck for 12 hours. And as you see in the film, you know, there were very leading questions. You know, he wasn't getting certain key crime scene facts that if you were there correctly. You know, the crime happened at night, and he started off confessing, saying it was during the morning. And he gave 5 different times of day until finally the police led him to the right time. And it is hard to imagine for rational people in a normal situation, why would I ever confess? But all that person is thinking is, I'm going to just say the right thing. I'm not going to implicate myself, and I just want this will get me to get out of the situation, and I'll work it out later. They just want to get out of that room, that interrogation room.
And his false confession wasn't the first one in that case.
Really?
Yeah, there was a guy who drove the ice cream truck, and right after the murders, he took off out to California to Oceanside, and Oceanside Police Department picked him up and forced him into a false confession for the very same crime.
What did you think, too, when you heard that, you know, you 3 are friends and you'd all been arrested for this? How did they tell you, hey, one of the guys confessed?
Well, at the time, my attorneys were still trying to figure things out. They weren't sure if they actually had innocent defendants. You know, they're just trying to figure things out. But, you know, as a defense attorney, they're going to defend no matter what. So they're trying to wrap their minds around this false confession of Jesse's, and they couldn't figure out why everything was all mixed up. You know, of course, they didn't even know when the actual crime occurred because they're not getting all their information from the state. You know, they're just trickling in a little bit of the evidence at a time. You know, just keeping my attorneys in the dark as to what happened or what was believed to happen and all that. So when I was told Jesse made a false confession, the first thing in my mind, the closest analogy I could come with it is a schoolyard bully bullying a kid and the crying uncle. Right. That's what the police department did to Jesse.
Were you angry at him at all?
They just held him. No, I'm not angry at him because it wasn't his fault. He was just a kid. He wasn't the one with the authority and the vows to protect and serve the innocent. You know, those were the West Memphis Police Department's vows. They're the ones that were supposed to protect Jesse, supposed to protect us. They're the ones that were supposed to protect the community. They're the ones that got out of line when they made his kid confess to a crime he didn't do.
And when you look back on this and from the process, do you think the main culprit, or because of the 3 guys, you seem to be the one who is the most vocal about being angry, and which I can certainly imagine I would be too. I can never understand how people aren't angry when they come out of these situations after having been so fucked by so many people, and how they can go, oh, I'm not angry. Like, how could they not be? At least you seem to be able to not hide the fact that you're angry, which is a relief to see that.
Right.
You know, I would feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah. That's,
well, the thing about that is you don't want to let righteous anger turn into bitterness and things like that to where your whole existence is clouded by just that. You know, because, you know, I'm free now and the circumstances aren't correct. There are things being done to make it correct. But at the same time, I still got to enjoy my life. Right. You know, because today is today, and once it's gone, it's over with.
What was the first thing you did when you walked out?
The very first thing? I went and got an ID so I can get on a plane and get out of the Mid-South.
Oh,
good
you wanted to leave for good?
Well, yeah. You know, when you're a kid growing up, even without all of this baggage that, you know, all this bad stuff that happened, you always dream of what's over the horizon, you know. You always want to go check out what's in the next state, what's in the next country, what's out there. So having spent 18 years in lockup, when the farthest north I'd ever been was the Craighead County Jail, the farthest west I'd ever been was the Pine Bluff unit and diagnostic unit in Pine Bluff. Farthest south was the Varner unit in Grady. I definitely wanted to get somewhere and see some things,
to get out of there.
And I had all these great letters coming from people all over the country, all over the world, saying, we believe in you 100%. When you get out, drop by and say, hey, So
wow.
I definitely wanted to check that out.
That just, it seemed, watching the documentary, so futile to try anything. It had to be so hard through all those years to think that you were ever going to really get out. It just seemed like everything that came up was against you.
I wasn't hopeless, but I felt helpless. For one, everybody I came in contact with, from Joe to different officers, Miss Curitan at the county jail, lock up all the way into prison, after spending time with me and talking to me, and stopping to actually question what was going on, they would be like, you know what, I believe you, and I hope you're freed, but they just couldn't do
no one could do anything
about it. They didn't have the keys. And whereas Judge Burnett, the prosecutor, Fogelman, Brent Davis, whereas they had the keys, but they refused to listen. They refused to reason.
I found them to be repulsive.
I tell them I'm innocent. I tell them where I was at that day, and it did not matter. They did not care. They did not consider anything. They were unreasonable.
What an abuse of power,
It really made me hate the state, not Arkansas or Tennessee or New Jersey, but the idea of the power that they can wield over you.
I mean, this is the classic example to just show you just how that power is abused. There was a DNA statute passed in Arkansas in 2001, which ultimately was the key to why they finally got out. That statute was passed in 2001. The state and the defendants argued for several years whether or not they could actually do the testing. Why would you not allow somebody who's claiming innocence to have any? Yeah. So they argued for several years about whether they can do the testing. Then they argued how the testing was going to get done. Then they argued who's going to do the testing. Finally, the test results after 6 years come out in 2007. Very compelling DNA evidence that's quite exculpatory for these guys. Comes out in 2007. It takes a year for Judge Burnett to then deny that they deserve a new trial based on that DNA evidence. He says the DNA evidence is not compelling. Then it takes 2 years to go to the Arkansas Supreme Court, and thank God the Arkansas Supreme Court in November of 2010 says, you know what, these guys do deserve an evidentiary hearing based on this DNA evidence, and set that date for December of 2011. That means 10 years have gone by to argue about and to get DNA evidence in front of a judge. As soon as that date was set for the 2011 evidentiary hearing, that scared the shit out of the state. Yep. And the state in 10 days makes this Alford plea deal. On August 9th, 2011, because they fear this evidentiary hearing.
They could have done that 10 years prior.
August 9th of 2011, they start talking about an Alford plea. August 19th, 10 days later, they're out of prison, whereas 10 years had gone by where they tried to stop this DNA evidence.
Because some scumbag judge and some scumbag prosecutor doesn't want to admit that they did something wrong, and they're worried about their own record.
Absolutely.
And the state's liability, I'm sure, for financial.
You see it in the movie. The new prosecutor, Scott Ellington, who had nothing to do with the original travesty of justice, but he says quite blankly in the film that we're doing this because we don't want to get sued.
We don't want to get sued for millions of dollars.
I can't imagine you're sitting in prison knowing, holy crap, I could be out like next week, and now you have to wait another 10 years. I can't even imagine what that would feel
That's
like.
what happens when you're poor, and one of you guys said we were just poor white trash, or someone said that that's how they viewed you. You didn't have the money to get enraging.
But what were you thinking, knowing in 2001, I could be out tomorrow. This is going to set me free, and then you have to wait a decade.
Well, I knew what I was dealing with by that point. I knew
no surprise.
I knew that
I would lose my mind.
Fogelman, Brent Davis, and Judge Burnett, I knew that they didn't just make a mistake and pick up the wrong guys. They deliberately made people lie on us. They deliberately took career criminals and gave them a free get-out-of-jail pass if they would lie on us. They deliberately forced Jesse to admit to doing something he did not do. These are not mistakes. These were calculated things. These were an abuse of power.